The blood-red sun dipped below the jagged horizon as Abigail Zimmerman clutched her worn leather satchel, stepping off the stagecoach that had carried her to Aztec, New Mexico territory. It was 1879, and the dust from the departing coach seemed to hang in the air like her suspended hopes, swirling around her threadbare dress as she surveyed the frontier town that would either be her salvation or her ruin. The journey west had emptied her purse and her spirit. Philadelphia seemed a lifetime ago. The scandal, the whispers, the doors closing one by one until the only path left led west. Teaching positions were scarce for unmarried women with tarnished reputations, but the telegram from Aztec had promised opportunity, even if the pay was meager and the conditions primitive. Abigail straightened her back, ignoring the stiffness from 3 days of rough travel. 22 years old and already acquainted with life's cruelties, she had learned that appearances mattered, especially when they were all you had left. "Miss Zimmerman," a voice called out, and Abigail turned to see a round-faced woman approaching. "I'm Mrs. Holloway from the town council." "We've been expecting you." "Yes, thank you for meeting me." Abigail's voice remained steady despite her exhaustion. "The schoolhouse isn't quite ready yet. Roof still needs work. We've arranged for you to stay with the Millers until then. They run the general store." As they walked down the dusty main street, Mrs. Holloway's chatter faded into background noise while Abigail took in her surroundings. Aztec was exactly what she had expected of a frontier town, raw, unpolished, filled with weathered buildings and weathered people. The saloon was doing brisk business, piano notes spilling onto the street alongside raucous laughter. Men in worn cowboy hats eyed her curiously as she passed. "Looks like rain coming," Mrs. Holloway remarked, glancing at darkening clouds. "Been dry for weeks. The ranchers are getting desperate." Before Abigail could respond, commotion erupted down the street. A horse came galloping through town, its rider slumped perilously in the saddle. Blood stained the man's shirt, crimson spreading across faded blue cotton. "My God, that's one of the Mitchell boys," Mrs. Holloway gasped. The horse continued its frantic pace until a tall figure stepped into the street. With remarkable composure, the man caught the bridle, steadying the panicked animal before it could throw its injured rider. In one fluid motion, he pulled the wounded cowboy from the saddle. "Someone get Doc Wilson." He shouted, his voice commanding immediate respect. Abigail found herself moving forward instinctively. Her father had been a physician, and she had assisted him often enough to recognize a critical situation. "I can help," she said, kneeling beside the injured man. "I have medical knowledge." The man who had stopped the horse, a cowboy with sun-weathered skin and eyes the color of a summer storm, gave her a quick, appraising glance. "Madam, my father was a doctor. This man needs pressure on his wound immediately." Without waiting for permission, Abigail tore a strip from her petticoat and pressed it against the bleeding gash on the young cowboy's shoulder. "Looks like a bullet wound," she observed. "Clean through, thankfully." The tall cowboy nodded, his expression shifting from skepticism to respect. "Mitchell Ranch was hit by rustlers. I'm Mason Young, foreman at the RRR." As they worked together to stabilize the injured rider, Abigail became acutely aware of Mason's presence, the confident way he directed onlookers to fetch water and bandages, the gentle strength with which he helped move the wounded man to the doctor's office when he arrived. There was something compelling about him that went beyond his physical presence, a quiet authority that seemed as natural as breathing. "You're new in town," he stated, rather than asked once the doctor had taken over. "Just arrived. I'm to be the schoolteacher." A ghost of a smile crossed his face. "Aztec's lucky to have someone with medical skills teaching its children." "I'm fortunate to have the position," Abigail replied, suddenly conscious of her disheveled appearance. She brushed ineffectually at the blood staining her skirt. "That was brave, what you did. Not many would step forward like that." His words were simple, but the intensity of his gaze suggested deeper thoughts. It was nothing special. Anyone with knowledge would have done the same. Mason looked as though he might disagree, but instead tipped his hat. "Welcome to Aztec, Miss Zimmerman, Abigail Zimmerman, Miss Zimmerman," he nodded. "I expect we'll be seeing more of each other." As he walked away, Abigail felt an unexpected flutter in her chest. She quickly suppressed it. She had come to Aztec to rebuild her life, not to be distracted by a handsome cowboy, no matter how compelling his storm-gray eyes might be. Mrs. Holloway reappeared at her side. "Well, I see you've met Mason Young. Most eligible bachelor in the county, though heaven knows plenty have tried to change that." "I was simply offering medical assistance," Abigail replied primly. "Of course, dear, now let's get you settled at the Millers. You look dead on your feet." The Miller family welcomed Abigail warmly. Sarah Miller, a kind woman with prematurely gray hair, showed her to a small but clean bedroom above the general store. "It's not much," Sarah apologized, "but it's yours for as long as you need." "It's perfect, thank you." And it was compared to the cramped quarters of the stagecoach or the drafty attic room she'd occupied in her cousin's Philadelphia home after her father's death. That night, as rain finally broke over Aztec, drumming on the roof and washing the dust from the air, Abigail sat by the window, writing in her journal. She documented her arrival, the incident with the injured cowboy, and her first impressions of the town. Deliberately, she avoided mentioning Mason Young more than necessary, as if limiting his presence on paper might diminish the impression he had made on her. Tomorrow she would begin preparing lessons for her students, learning the rhythms of this frontier town, and building the new life she had traveled so far to find. There was no room in that life for distractions, especially ones with storm-gray eyes, and the ability to make her forget, however briefly, all the reasons she needed to guard her heart. The schoolhouse stood at the edge of town, a simple one-room building with rough-hewn pine benches and a pot-bellied stove that Sarah Miller warned smokes something terrible when the wind's from the east. The roof repairs were nearly complete, with only a few spots still covered by tarpaulins. Abigail spent her first week in Aztec preparing the classroom, organizing the meager supplies, and meeting the families whose children would soon be under her tutelage. The people were generally welcoming, though she noticed some of the women regarded her with guarded curiosity. Being an unmarried woman from the East made her something of an anomaly. The Miller store became her sanctuary. James Miller, Sarah's husband, was a quiet man who spent evenings reading aloud from books he ordered from Denver. Their 16-year-old son, Thomas, helped in the store and peppered Abigail with questions about Philadelphia. The simple rhythm of their family life soothed her, reminding her of happier times. She saw Mason Young only once that week, riding through town with several cowboys from the RRR. He tipped his hat to her as he passed the store, but didn't stop. Abigail told herself she was relieved rather than disappointed. On Sunday, Abigail attended church services with the Millers. Pastor Brighton delivered a sermon about new beginnings that seemed aimed directly at her, though she knew that was her own conscience speaking. After the service, as townspeople gathered outside to socialize, Abigail found herself introduced to countless names and faces. "And this is Joseph Mitchell," Mrs. Holloway said, presenting a gray-haired man with a military bearing. "He owns the largest ranch in the county." "Miss Zimmerman," Mitchell said, taking her hand, "I understand you helped my nephew when he was shot. The doctor says your quick action likely prevented a worse infection. I'm glad I could help. How is he recovering?" "Well enough to be complaining about being confined to bed," Mitchell chuckled. "I've come to extend an invitation. The RRR and my ranch are hosting a social next Saturday, a barn raising for one of our cowhands who lost his place in a fire. We'd be honored if you'd attend." "That's very kind," Abigail began hesitantly. "The whole town will be there," Mrs. Holloway interjected. "It's a tradition, and a fine way for you to meet everyone before school starts." Finding no graceful way to decline, Abigail accepted, though social gatherings had been her downfall in Philadelphia. There, at a literary society meeting, she had met Edward Blackwell, the charming professor whose attentions had seemed so genuine until they weren't, until her reputation lay in tatters, while his remained unblemished. The week passed quickly. Abigail threw herself into preparations for her students, creating lessons and organizing the small collection of books. She visited each family with school-aged children, introducing herself and assessing educational needs. The work was fulfilling, leaving her little time to dwell on the past or worry about the upcoming social event. Saturday arrived with perfect late summer weather. Sarah Miller insisted on lending Abigail her second-best dress for the occasion, a pale blue cotton that complemented Abigail's auburn hair better than anything in her own limited wardrobe. "You look lovely," Sarah assured her as they rode to the Mitchell Ranch in the Miller's wagon. "The color brings out your eyes." Abigail fidgeted with the borrowed gloves. "I'm not accustomed to such gatherings." "It's nothing formal," James Miller assured her, "just neighbors helping neighbors." The Mitchell Ranch sprawled across a verdant valley with mountains rising in the distance. When they arrived, the barn raising was well underway. Men swarmed over the timber frame like industrious ants, while women had set up tables laden with food. Children darted about in improvised games, their laughter carrying on the breeze. Abigail was immediately put to work helping serve refreshments to the workers. She fell into easy conversation with the local women, finding them less judgmental than she had feared. Many were curious about teaching methods, concerned about their children's futures in a changing territory. "Education is the foundation of opportunity," she told Mrs. Brighton, the pastor's wife. "Even here, especially here, children need more than just practical skills." "Some disagree," Mrs. Brighton nodded toward a group of older ranchers. "They think book learning is wasted on children who'll spend their lives herding cattle." "Perhaps they've never seen how knowledge can transform a life," Abigail replied, thinking of her father's insistence that she receive education equal to any man's. As afternoon stretched toward evening, the barn's skeleton took shape. Work paused for a proper meal, followed by music and dancing on a wooden platform constructed for the occasion. Lanterns were lit as twilight descended, casting golden light over the gathering. Abigail was helping serve coffee when she felt someone's presence behind her. Turning, she found herself face to face with Mason Young. "Miss Zimmerman," he said, the hint of a smile playing at the corners of his mouth. "I was beginning to think you were avoiding me." "Mr. Young," she acknowledged, fighting an unexpected flutter in her chest. "I've been rather busy preparing for the school term, so I've heard. The children are excited especially about having a teacher who knows real medicine." Abigail smiled despite herself. "The young Mitchell boy has been talking, I see. Word travels fast in Aztec." Mason's eyes held hers for a moment longer than necessary. "Would you do me the honor of a dance?" The fiddle players were striking up a lively tune. Around them, couples were moving toward the dance floor. "I'm helping with the refreshments," she demurred. "I believe you've served enough coffee for one evening," Sarah Miller interrupted, appearing beside them with a conspiratorial smile. "Go on, enjoy yourself." Finding no graceful escape, Abigail allowed Mason to lead her to the dance floor. His hand was warm against the small of her back, strong and steadying as they joined the other dancers. "I should warn you," she said as they began to move with the music, "I'm not particularly accomplished at dancing." "You're doing fine," he assured her, guiding her through the steps with unexpected grace for such a tall man. "Just follow my lead." The dance was a simple one, with couples weaving between one another in practiced patterns. Abigail found herself relaxing into the rhythm, enjoying the music and the ease with which Mason moved. Up close, she noticed details she had missed before: a small scar at his temple, the way the corners of his eyes crinkled when he smiled, the clean scent of soap that clung to him beneath the day's honest sweat. "How long have you worked at the Triple R?" she asked, seeking safe conversation. 5 years as foreman, 3 before that as a regular hand. Joseph Mitchell is a good man to work for, and before that, something flickered in his expression. "I drifted, Texas mostly, tried my hand at different things." The music shifted to a slower tune. Couples around them drew closer together, but Mason maintained a respectable distance while still holding her firmly. "And you?" he asked. "What brings a Philadelphia doctor's daughter to teach in a place like Aztec?" Abigail tensed. "How did you know about my father?" Mrs. Holloway mentioned it. "Small towns have big ears," she finished wryly. "Yes, my father was a physician. He passed away last year. I'm sorry for your loss." "Thank you." Abigail hesitated, then offered the sanitized version of her story. After his death, there was little keeping me in Philadelphia. When I saw the advertisement for a teacher here, it seemed like an opportunity for a fresh start. Mason studied her face as they danced, and Abigail had the disconcerting feeling he could see through her partial truths. Fresh starts are valuable, he said finally. The West is built on them. Is that what brought you here? A fresh start? His smile returned, though it didn't quite reach his eyes. Something like that. We all have stories we'd rather leave behind, Miss Zimmerman. The perceptiveness of his comment unsettled her. Before she could respond, the music ended, and couples around them applauded the musicians. "Thank you for the dance," Abigail said, stepping back to put proper distance between them. "The pleasure was mine." Mason bowed slightly. "Would you like some fresh air?" "The night's too fine to spend entirely indoors." Propriety dictated she decline, but something in his expression and openness, a lack of artifice, made her hesitate. "Just a short walk," she agreed, surprising herself. They moved away from the crowded barn, following a path that led toward a small rise overlooking the ranch. The night was clear, stars scattered across the dark canvas of sky in greater profusion than Abigail had ever witnessed in Philadelphia. "It's beautiful," she breathed, gazing upward. "One thing I never tire of," Mason agreed, standing beside her. "No matter how many times I see it." For several minutes they stood in comfortable silence, the distant sounds of music and laughter floating up from the barn. "Your students are fortunate," Mason said eventually. "Not many teachers would come to a place like this, especially women with other options." Abigail smiled wryly. "What makes you think I had other options? Education, breeding, the way you carry yourself, you could have found a position in any number of more civilized places." She turned to face him. "Perhaps I wanted adventure. Did you?" The directness of his gaze compelled honesty. "No," she admitted, "but I needed change." Mason nodded, seeming to accept this without requiring further explanation. "Aztec may be rough around the edges, but there's good here. People who value education, even if they don't always show it. Like you. I've read more books than most would guess, looking at me. I wouldn't underestimate you, Mr. Young." "Mason, please." "Mason, then." The familiarity felt dangerous, but not unwelcome. "And I'm Abigail when we're not in formal company." A sound in the darkness startled them, a hoarse whinnying, followed by a low murmur of voices. Mason tensed instantly, his posture shifting from relaxed to alert. "We should head back," he said, his tone suddenly businesslike. "The dew's settling." "You'll catch cold." The change was so abrupt that Abigail blinked in confusion. "Is something wrong?" "Not at all." He offered his arm with perfect courtesy. "But the Millers will be wondering where you've gone." As they walked back toward the festivities, Abigail sensed Mason scanning the darkness around them, his jaw set in a way that belied his casual words. Something had disturbed him, but she couldn't imagine what. The remainder of the evening passed pleasantly, but without further private conversation. Mason rejoined the other R Cowboys, while Abigail found herself surrounded by curious townswomen eager to discuss the upcoming school term. When the Millers were ready to depart, Mason appeared to help Abigail into the wagon, his hand lingering briefly on hers. "I look forward to our next meeting, Miss Zimmerman," he said formally, aware of watching eyes. "Likewise, Mr. Young." As the wagon pulled away, Abigail glanced back to see Mason deep in conversation with Joseph Mitchell, both men wearing serious expressions that contrasted sharply with the festive atmosphere around them. "He seems quite taken with you," Sarah Miller observed, following Abigail's gaze. "We barely know each other," Abigail protested. Sarah smiled. "That's how it begins." Abigail turned to watch the road ahead, wondering what exactly had begun that night and why the prospect filled her with both anticipation and dread. The schoolhouse opened its doors to 27 students ranging from 6 to 16 years of age. Abigail quickly discovered the challenges of teaching multiple grade levels simultaneously, but found joy in the children's eager minds. Most had received only sporadic education previously, whenever traveling teachers had passed through or parents had time to instruct them. "You mean the earth goes around the sun?" 12-year-old Emma Richardson asked incredulously during Abigail's first science lesson. Pastor Brighton says the heavens revolve around us, like in the Bible. The Bible tells us about faith and morality, Abigail explained carefully, while science helps us understand the physical world. Both have their place. She was mindful of not contradicting local religious teachings while still providing accurate information. It was a delicate balance, one she discussed with Pastor Brighton himself when he visited the school during her second week. "You have a thoughtful approach, Miss Zimmerman," he acknowledged after observing her lessons. "These children need broader horizons, even if some parents are skeptical." "I'm trying to respect community values while expanding their knowledge," she replied. "It's challenging at times." "The best teaching always is," the pastor smiled. "You're doing good work here." Such endorsement helped ease Abigail's path with more conservative families. Soon, a rhythm developed mornings devoted to reading, writing, and arithmetic for all students. Afternoons split between advanced studies for older children and practical skills for the younger ones. 2 weeks after school began, Abigail was working late, preparing the next day's lessons by lamplight when a knock came at the schoolhouse door. Cautiously, she approached, calling, "Who's there?" "Mason Young, Miss Zimmerman." Surprised, she opened the door to find him holding the reins of his horse, hat in hand. "Mr. Young, is everything all right?" "Everything's fine," he assured her. "I was passing by, saw the light, thought I should check that all was well, just preparing lessons." Abigail became acutely aware of her disheveled appearance, hair coming loose from its pins, ink stains on her fingers. "It's getting late. Might I escort you back to town?" "That's kind, but unnecessary. The Millers are expecting me for supper." Mason shifted his weight, seemingly reluctant to leave. "There's been talk of cattle rustlers in the area. Not safe for a lady to be alone after dark." "Cattle rustlers would hardly be interested in a schoolteacher, I imagine." "Bad men don't make such distinctions, Miss Zimmerman." Something in his tone suggested personal knowledge that gave Abigail pause. "Has something happened?" Mason hesitated. "The Triple R lost a dozen head last week. Mitchell Ranch, too. Whoever's doing it is growing bolder. How dreadful." Abigail glanced at her scattered papers. "Give me a moment to gather my things." As she collected her materials, Mason remained by the door, his stance protective. When she was ready, he helped her onto his horse, then mounted behind her. The arrangement was hardly proper, but more practical than walking the half-mile to town in the gathering darkness. "You've made quite an impression," Mason remarked as they rode. "The Richardson boy told me you're teaching them about distant planets." "Jacob has a quick mind for science," Abigail replied, conscious of Mason's proximity, his arms encircling her as he held the reins. "Many of the children do when given the opportunity. You speak as though education is a passion, not merely employment." "It is. My father believed knowledge was the greatest inheritance he could leave me. I hope to pass that belief to my students." They rode in silence for a moment before Mason spoke again, his voice closer to her ear. "I've been meaning to call on you properly. To invite you to Sunday dinner at the Triple R." Abigail's pulse quickened. "That would be pleasant. This Sunday, then. I can collect you after church." "Yes, thank you." As they reached town, Mason guided his horse toward the Miller store rather than stopping in the main street where they might be observed. It was a considerate gesture, protecting her reputation from idle gossip. "Thank you for the escort," Abigail said as he helped her dismount. "My pleasure." He held her hand a moment longer than necessary. "Until Sunday." Abigail watched him ride away, a tall silhouette against the darkening sky, before entering the store. Sarah Miller's knowing smile suggested the arrangement hadn't been as discreet as Abigail had hoped. "Mason Young escorting you home," Sarah remarked. "How gallant." "He happened to be passing the schoolhouse," Abigail explained, feeling a blush rise in her cheeks. "A fortunate coincidence," Sarah replied, unconvinced, "especially since the Triple R lies in the opposite direction." Abigail had no response to that observation. Sunday arrived with Abigail experiencing a nervousness she hadn't felt since her first teaching position. She wore her best dress, a forest green wool that had been altered 3 times to keep up with changing fashions, and arranged her hair with particular care. After church, Mason was waiting by a smart buggy rather than his usual mount. He had exchanged his work clothes for a clean shirt, vest, and polished boots. The effort he had made for the occasion wasn't lost on Abigail. "You look lovely," he said simply as he handed her into the buggy. "Thank you, so do you." The words slipped out before she could censor them, and she felt herself blush. Mason's smile deepened the creases around his eyes in a way that made Abigail's heart flutter traitorously. "Been a while since anyone accused me of looking lovely, but I'll take the compliment." The Triple R ranch house surprised Abigail. Rather than the rough cabin she had expected, it was a substantial structure of squared logs with glass windows and a wide porch. Flower beds bordered the front walk, and smoke curled invitingly from the stone chimney. "It's beautiful," she said as Mason helped her down from the buggy. "Joseph Mitchell believes in building things to last," Mason replied. "He's been like a father to me these past years." Inside, the house was equally impressive, with polished wood floors, comfortable furniture, and bookshelves lining one wall of the main room. Joseph Mitchell greeted them warmly, as did his sister, Martha, who had come west to keep house for her widowed brother after his wife died years earlier. "We're so pleased you could join us," Martha said, taking Abigail's hand. "Mason speaks very highly of you." "He does." Abigail glanced at Mason, who was suddenly occupied with hanging up his hat. "Indeed, says you're the finest teacher Aztec's ever had and the bravest woman he's met." Martha's eyes twinkled. High praise from a man not known for exaggeration. Dinner was a pleasant affair, with roast beef, fresh vegetables from Martha's garden, and apple pie for dessert. The conversation ranged from local matters to wider issues: the territory's push for statehood, railroad expansion, and the changing dynamics between settlers and native populations. "You have perspective we lack, coming from the East," Joseph said to Abigail. "What do you make of the government's policies regarding Indian affairs?" It was a loaded question in a territory where conflicts between settlers and indigenous people remained fresh wounds. Abigail chose her words carefully. "I believe most policies are created by people far removed from the realities faced by both settlers and native peoples. There's much misunderstanding on all sides." "Diplomatic answer," Joseph observed with approval. "But what do you believe is right?" "I believe in honoring agreements made, whether between nations or individuals. And I believe education offers the best hope for mutual understanding in the future." Joseph nodded thoughtfully. "Well said. The Navajo children attending your school are fortunate to have a teacher with such views." After dinner, Martha insisted on showing Abigail her garden, leaving Mason and Joseph to their cigars on the porch. "My brother thinks highly of Mason," Martha confided as they walked among late blooming flowers. "Never had sons of his own, so Mason's become like one to him." "They seem close," Abigail agreed. "Mason came to us during a dark time, lost his family young, fell in with bad company for a while. Joseph saw something in him worth saving, offered him honest work and respect." Martha bent to deadhead a wilting rose. Not many men would have given such a chance. "What happened to Mason's family?" Abigail asked, curiosity overcoming propriety. Martha straightened, her expression somber. "Not my story to tell, dear, but know this: he's become a good man despite having seen more than his share of hardship." Before Abigail could pursue the subject, Mason appeared at the garden gate. "Thought you might enjoy seeing the rest of the ranch before the light fades," he suggested. With Martha's blessing, Abigail joined him for a tour of the property. The Triple R was impressive: hundreds of acres of grazing land, well-built corrals and outbuildings, and a bunkhouse for the cowboys that was cleaner and more orderly than many homes Abigail had visited. "Mr. Mitchell runs a good operation," she observed as they walked. "The best," Mason agreed. "He believes in treating land and people right. Makes for loyalty you can't buy." They climbed a gentle slope that offered a view of the entire valley, coming to rest beneath a lone cottonwood tree. The afternoon sun cast golden light across the landscape, turning ordinary pastures into something magical. "Thank you for coming today," Mason said, his voice quieter than usual. "It means a lot to Joseph and Martha, to me as well. I've enjoyed myself very much." Abigail turned to face him, finding him closer than she had realized. "Abigail." The way he said her name sent a shiver through her. I'm not a man of fancy words, but I want you to know my intentions are honorable. I'd like to court you properly if you'll allow it." The directness of his statement both thrilled and terrified her. In Philadelphia, Edward Blackwell had spent months with subtle flirtations and double meanings before revealing his true character. Mason's straightforward approach was refreshing yet frightening in its potential for genuine heartbreak. "Mason, I'm flattered, but you should know." She hesitated. "My past isn't as straightforward as I've let people believe." "None of ours are," he replied simply. "The past matters less to me than who you are now." "You might think differently if you knew. Did you kill someone?" he interrupted. "What? No, of course not. Steal, betray your country, break the commandments in some unforgivable way." "No, but then nothing you could tell me would change my mind." His gaze held hers, unwavering. "I've seen enough of life to know a good person when I meet one. You're good, Abigail Zimmerman, whatever you think you've done wrong." Tears threatened at his words, at the simple faith he placed in her character when she had spent months doubting herself. "You're very sure for someone who barely knows me," she managed, blinking rapidly. "Some things you just know." His hand found hers, warm and calloused. "Give me a chance to prove I'm right." How could she resist such certainty, such quiet strength? Abigail's defenses, carefully constructed over months of self-recrimination, began to crumble. "Yes," she whispered, "I'd like that." The smile that transformed his face made her decision worthwhile, regardless of what might come. For that moment, with the sun setting behind distant mountains and Mason's hand holding hers, Abigail allowed herself to believe in new beginnings. As autumn progressed, Mason courted Abigail with a combination of old-fashioned formality and frontier practicality. There were buggy rides on Sunday afternoons, carefully chaperoned dinners at the Millers, and occasional walks after school hours. Mason also showed his affection in more practical ways, repairing the schoolhouse roof properly, building bookshelves for Abigail's growing collection of teaching materials, and ensuring she had firewood stacked beside the stove before winter's arrival. Abigail found herself looking forward to his visits, even the briefest ones. Sometimes he would ride past the schoolhouse at day's end, tipping his hat without stopping, but those momentary connections brightened her day. "You're good for him," Joseph Mitchell remarked one Sunday after dinner when Mason had stepped outside to check on a noise. "Never seen him smile so much." "He's good for me too," Abigail admitted. It was true. Mason's steady presence and unwavering support had helped rebuild her confidence, both as a teacher and as a woman. Not everyone viewed their courtship favorably. Some townspeople considered Abigail too educated, too Eastern for a working cowboy, even one as respected as Mason. Others whispered that she must have secrets, to have come west alone. "People always talk," Sarah Miller advised when Abigail mentioned overhearing such comments. "They'll find something new to gossip about soon enough." The cattle rustling continued, growing more brazen as winter approached. Several ranches reported losses, and tension in the territory increased. Mason was often away tracking stolen herds or strengthening security at the R, leaving Abigail to worry about his safety. One crisp November afternoon, as Abigail was dismissing her students, she noticed a stranger loitering near the schoolhouse. Tall and expensively dressed, with a dandified appearance that seemed out of place in Aztec, he watched the children depart with an intensity that made Abigail uneasy. "May I help you, sir?" she called, keeping her tone professional despite her discomfort. The man approached, removing a bowler hat to reveal dark hair streaked with premature gray. "Miss Zimmerman, how delightful to find you in such rustic surroundings." Recognition hit Abigail like a physical blow. Edward Blackwell, the man whose false promises had led to her disgrace in Philadelphia, now stood before her, smiling as though they were old friends. "Professor Blackwell," she acknowledged, her voice flat. "What brings you to New Mexico territory?" "Academic research, officially," he replied with the smooth charm she remembered too well. "But finding you here is an unexpected pleasure." "I doubt that," Abigail said coldly. "Please excuse me, I have work to complete." She turned to re-enter the schoolhouse, but Blackwell caught her arm. "Don't be hasty, Abigail. We have much to discuss." "We have nothing to discuss." She pulled away from his grip. Please leave. You disappeared rather suddenly from Philadelphia, he continued as if she hadn't spoken, left quite a few questions unanswered. The only question was how quickly I could distance myself from your lies. Blackwell's pleasant expression hardened. Careful, my dear. Your position here seems respectable. Would be a shame if certain stories reached the town council. The threat was unmistakable. Abigail felt cold fear settle in her stomach, but forced herself to meet his gaze steadily. Are you attempting to blackmail me, Professor? That seems beneath even your standards. Merely pointing out mutual interests, he smiled again, all charm. I'm staying at the hotel for several days. Perhaps we could dine together tomorrow, for old time's sake. Before Abigail could refuse, the sound of approaching hoofbeats interrupted them. Mason appeared on horseback, his expression shifting from pleasant greeting to sharp concern as he took in the scene. Everything all right, Miss Zimmerman? He asked, dismounting but keeping his distance, respecting her independence while clearly offering support. Yes, thank you, Mr. Young. Abigail seized the opportunity. Professor Blackwell was just leaving. Professor, Mason extended his hand with superficial courtesy. Mason Young, Triple R Ranch. Edward Blackwell, University of Pennsylvania, Blackwell replied, shaking Mason's hand with visible distaste. An old acquaintance of Miss Zimmerman's. The emphasis he placed on acquaintance made Abigail flush with anger and embarrassment. How fortunate for her to have old friends visit, Mason replied, his tone neutral but his eyes watchful. Were you heading back to town, Professor? I'd be happy to show you the way. The dismissal was subtle but unmistakable. Blackwell hesitated, glancing between them before settling his hat back on his head. Another time, perhaps, Abigail. I look forward to continuing our conversation. After he departed, Mason turned to Abigail with concern. Who is he really? Exactly who he claims to be, Abigail sighed. And the reason I left Philadelphia, Mason's expression darkened. Did he harm you? Not physically. Abigail hesitated, then decided honesty was necessary. He was my father's colleague. After father died, he pursued me, made promises he never intended to keep. When I discovered he was already married, I confronted him, and he ensured I was labeled the instigator, the seductress. My reputation was ruined. Teaching positions were withdrawn. Coming west was my only option. She waited for judgment, for the withdrawal she had feared since meeting Mason. Instead, he reached for her hand, his touch gentle but firm. Thank you for telling me. You're not disgusted with him, absolutely, with you. Mason shook his head. Never. You were wronged, Abigail. That doesn't change who you are. Relief weakened her knees. He's threatening to tell people here, to ruin things again. Let him try, Mason's voice hardened. Aztec isn't Philadelphia, and you're not alone anymore. The simple promise brought tears to Abigail's eyes. Mason pulled her gently into an embrace, propriety forgotten in the face of her distress. I won't let him hurt you again, he murmured against her hair. That's a promise I intend to keep. For the first time since her father's death, Abigail felt truly protected, truly understood. She allowed herself to lean into Mason's strength, accepting the comfort he offered without shame. Neither noticed the distant figure of Edward Blackwell watching from the bend in the road, his expression calculating as he observed their embrace. The next morning, Abigail arrived at school to find her students unusually subdued. When she asked what troubled them, 11-year-old Samuel Williams raised his hand hesitantly. Ma says you ain't really a proper teacher, he blurted. Says you had to leave Philadelphia 'cause you did something wrong. Abigail's stomach clenched, but she kept her expression calm. That's partly true, Samuel. I did leave Philadelphia after being treated unfairly, but I am a qualified teacher and I care deeply about all of you. Pa says it don't matter what happened back east, Emma Richardson offered loyally. Says you're the best teacher we ever had. Thank you, Emma. Abigail took a deep breath. Let's begin our lessons. We have much to accomplish today. By noon, it was clear that Blackwell had wasted no time spreading his version of events through town. When Abigail walked to the general store during lunch break, conversations stopped abruptly, and several women gathered their children closer as she passed. Don't let them see it bothers you, Sarah Miller advised when Abigail entered the store. Stand tall and keep to your routine. They're looking at me the way Philadelphia did, Abigail whispered, like I'm corrupted somehow. Some are, Sarah acknowledged. Others are just curious. Give them time to remember who you've shown yourself to be these past months. That afternoon, Pastor Brighton visited the school, waiting until the children had been dismissed before approaching Abigail. "Miss Zimmerman," he began gently, "I've heard some troubling rumors. I imagine you have." Abigail straightened her shoulders. "Would you like my version of events?" The pastor nodded, and Abigail told him everything: her father's death, Blackwell's pursuit and betrayal, the social ostracism that followed her attempt to clear her name. "I came here for a fresh start," she concluded. "I've never lied about my qualifications or character, only omitted painful details that I believed irrelevant to my position here." Pastor Brighton was silent for a long moment before speaking. "The Bible teaches us much about forgiveness and the dangers of bearing false witness. It seems to me you've been victim to both lack of forgiveness and deliberate falsehood." "Then you believe me?" "I do," he smiled kindly. "More importantly, I believe in what I've observed of your character these past months. The tree is known by its fruit, Miss Zimmerman, and yours has been nothing but positive for this community." His support bolstered Abigail's resolve. When the town council called an emergency meeting that evening to discuss her position, she attended with her head held high, ready to defend herself. The meeting was held in the church, the largest public building in town. It seemed half of Aztec had crowded inside, including Edward Blackwell, who sat prominently near the front, his expression smugly confident. Mayor Thompson called for order. "We're here to discuss concerns raised about Miss Zimmerman's suitability as our schoolteacher in light of certain revelations about her past." "Allegations," Mason corrected from where he stood at the back of the room, "not revelations." "Indeed," Joseph Mitchell agreed, rising from his seat. "Before we give weight to a stranger's words, we should consider Miss Zimmerman's demonstrated character during her time among us." Blackwell stood, straightening his expensive waistcoat. "With respect, sir, I have documentation of Miss Zimmerman's dismissal from her previous position, a dismissal that occurred after her inappropriate relationship with a married faculty member was discovered." Murmurs ran through the crowd. Abigail felt her cheeks burn but kept her gaze steady. "That faculty member being yourself, I presume?" Pastor Brighton asked mildly. Blackwell hesitated. "I was involved in the disciplinary proceedings, yes." "How convenient," Mason remarked, loud enough to be heard. "The accuser also serving as judge." Mayor Thompson raised his hands for quiet. "Miss Zimmerman, would you care to address these allegations?" Abigail rose slowly, facing the assembled townspeople. Many had become friends, others remained strangers. All were now judge and jury in the court of her reputation. "What Professor Blackwell has not told you," she began clearly, "is that he pursued me after my father's death when I was vulnerable and alone. He promised marriage while concealing that he already had a wife. When I discovered his deception and refused further contact, he used his influence to have me dismissed and blacklisted from teaching positions in the East." She paused, drawing strength from Mason's supportive presence across the room. "I came to Aztec seeking honest work and a chance to rebuild my life with dignity. I have never misrepresented my qualifications or behaved inappropriately with any member of this community. If my presence here has become untenable due to Professor Blackwell's accusations, I will accept your judgment, but I will not accept his characterization of me or my actions." Sarah Miller stood up from her seat. "I've had Miss Zimmerman living under my roof for months. She's shown nothing but exemplary character, dedication to her students, and respect for our community's values. My children have learned more from her in 2 months than in the previous 2 years, added Mr. Richardson, surprising Abigail with his support. "I don't much care what happened in Philadelphia." One by one, parents and community members spoke up, some defending her, others expressing concerns about moral influence on their children. The debate grew heated until Joseph Mitchell called for order. "This seems simple enough to resolve," he said when attention turned to him. "Professor Blackwell claims to have documentation. Let us see it, not just assertions in a letter, but actual proof of Miss Zimmerman's alleged misconduct." All eyes turned to Blackwell, who shifted uncomfortably. The specific nature of the evidence is delicate, not suitable for public display. Convenient, Mason commented. Accusations without proof. Where I come from, that's called slander. I have my reputation as evidence, Blackwell bristled. As does Miss Zimmerman, Pastor Brighton pointed out. And hers among us has been impeccable. Mayor Thompson considered the arguments before addressing the council. In the absence of concrete evidence, and given Miss Zimmerman's positive contributions to our community, I suggest we consider this matter closed unless Professor Blackwell can provide substantiation for his claims. The vote was not unanimous, but the majority supported retaining Abigail as teacher. As the meeting dispersed, she found herself surrounded by supportive parents and friends, their words of encouragement washing away some of the hurt caused by Blackwell's accusations. Mason waited until the crowd thinned before approaching. "I'd like to see you home," he said quietly. They walked in silence through the crisp evening air, Mason's presence solid and reassuring beside her. At the miller's door, he finally spoke. "You were brave in there." "I was terrified," Abigail admitted. "Still am, even with the council's support, mud sticks. Not as much as you think. People respect courage." She looked up at him, searching his face for any hint of doubt or disgust. "And you, has your opinion of me changed?" "Yes," he said simply, causing her heart to sink until he continued. "I admire you even more than before. Standing your ground like that took real strength." Relief flooded through her. "Thank you for supporting me. Always will." Mason's hand found hers, warm against the evening chill. "Blackwell's leaving on tomorrow's stage, by the way." Abigail blinked in surprise. "How do you know?" "Let's just say Joseph and I had a private conversation with him after the meeting. Explained certain facts about Western hospitality and the consequences of overstaying one's welcome." "You threatened him," merely clarified his options. Mason's smile held a hint of steel. He chose the sensible one. Abigail should have been appalled at such tactics, but found herself only grateful. "Thank you. No need for thanks." Mason's expression softened. "Abigail, nothing that happened tonight changes what I feel for you. If anything, it's made me more certain." "Certain of what?" Instead of answering directly, he bent and kissed her gently at first, then with growing confidence as she responded. It was nothing like Blackwell's calculated embraces. Mason's kiss held genuine emotion, respect mingled with desire. When they parted, both slightly breathless, Mason touched her cheek with a tenderness that made her heart ache. "Certain that I'm falling in love with you," he said simply. "And hoping you might feel something similar." The honesty of his declaration demanded equal honesty in return. "I do," she whispered. "It terrifies me, but I do." His smile illuminated his entire face. "Then we'll face the terror together." As Mason walked back toward his waiting horse, Abigail watched him go with a lightness in her heart that hadn't been there in years. Blackwell had tried to destroy her newfound happiness, but instead had only strengthened the connections binding her to Aztec and to Mason. Winter settled over Aztec with blanketing snow and bitter winds. The schoolhouse stove worked overtime to keep the children warm during lessons, and attendance became irregular as weather made travel difficult for families living farther out. Despite the challenges, it was a time of growth for Abigail. Her relationship with Mason deepened, their courtship becoming an acknowledged fact in town. After Blackwell's departure and the council's vote of confidence, most townspeople had accepted Abigail's version of events, some even apologized for their initial doubts. "People come around when given time," Mason observed during one of their Sunday rides. "They've seen who you really are." "Not everyone," Abigail reminded him. A few families still kept their distance, and occasional whispers followed her through town. "Can't please everyone," Mason shrugged. "Long as we please each other." The casual reference to "we" warmed Abigail more than her heavy cloak. Their relationship had progressed to a comfortable certainty, no formal engagement yet, but an understanding that their futures were intertwined. December brought Christmas preparations, and a school pageant that united the town in celebration. Even the most skeptical parents attended to watch their children perform, and Abigail's efforts earned universal praise. As winter deepened into January, life settled into a peaceful rhythm. The peace shattered one frigid morning when Abigail arrived at the schoolhouse to find the door standing open, snow drifting across the threshold. Inside, destruction greeted her, books torn apart, desks overturned, and scrawled across the blackboard in crude letters. No place for fallen women. She stood frozen, staring at the devastation until the sound of approaching footsteps roused her. Turning, she found Mason in the doorway, his expression darkening as he took in the scene. "I came to check the stove before classes," he explained, stepping inside. "Who did this?" "I don't know." Abigail's voice sounded distant to her own ears. "Does it matter? The message is clear enough." Mason surveyed the damage, his jaw tight. "This isn't the town speaking. This is one or two small-minded fools with enough hatred to destroy months of work." Abigail picked up a torn book, a treasured collection of poetry she had brought from Philadelphia. The children's essays were in that desk, their progress reports, all ruined. "We'll rebuild," Mason promised, moving to her side. "We'll clean this up before the children arrive. And then—" "Wait for it to happen again." Abigail felt tears threatening. "Perhaps I was foolish to think I could outrun the past." "This isn't about your past," Mason insisted. "The cattle rustling, now this something's not right in Aztec lately. This feels connected somehow." Abigail frowned. How could schoolhouse vandalism connect to cattle theft? Before Mason could answer, Sheriff Taylor appeared in the doorway, his weathered face grim. "Miss Zimmerman, Mr. Young, trouble here too, I see." "You found other damage?" Mason asked sharply. "General store was broken into last night. Nothing valuable taken, just merchandise scattered about, and the church had windows smashed." The sheriff examined the blackboard message. "Same handwriting on the store wall. Outsiders not welcome." "This isn't random vandalism," Mason concluded. "It's coordinated." "Appears so." Sheriff Taylor nodded. "Question is, why now, and who benefits from stirring up trouble?" As they talked, other townspeople began arriving, first the Millers, then Joseph Mitchell, followed by parents bringing children for school. Reactions ranged from outrage to uncomfortable silence when they saw the blackboard message. Mayor Thompson arrived, surveyed the damage, and immediately called for volunteers to help clean up. "School's canceled today," he announced, "but we'll have it ready for tomorrow. This vandalism will not disrupt our children's education." The community response heartened Abigail. Within hours, the schoolhouse was cleaned, broken furniture repaired or replaced, and new books promised from neighboring towns. Joseph Mitchell donated a lockable cabinet for storing valuable materials, and several fathers volunteered to take turns watching the schoolhouse at night. "See," Mason said as they worked side by side reordering bookshelves. "This is the real Aztec people coming together, not tearing apart." "I'm beginning to believe that," Abigail admitted. That evening, a town meeting was called to address the vandalism. Sheriff Taylor reported finding tracks suggesting at least 3 men had been involved in the various incidents. "Same men been stealing cattle, by my reckoning," he concluded. "Question is why they'd shift to vandalism targeted at town institutions." "To divide us," Joseph Mitchell suggested. "Create distrust among neighbors when we should be uniting against outside threats." "Or to drive away certain people," added Mason, his hand finding Abigail's under the table where they sat. The discussion continued until Pastor Brighton stood. "Whatever the motive, our response must be unity. Miss Zimmerman has proven her worth to this community. If these attacks are meant to intimidate her or any of us, they must not succeed." The declaration received strong support, though Abigail noticed a few dissenters at the back of the room. One face in particular caught her attention, a thin-faced man watching proceedings with calculating eyes. When he noticed her gaze, his lips curved in a smile that raised the hair on her neck. "Who is that man at the back?" she whispered to Mason. "By the door with the scar near his eye." Mason turned slightly, then stiffened. "Victor Reese, works for the Bar X ranch north of here." His voice had cooled noticeably. "Why, the way he's watching? It seems personal somehow." Mason's expression darkened. "Stay away from him if you can. He's not someone you want to know." Before Abigail could press for details, Mayor Thompson called for increased vigilance and patrols. The meeting dispersed with a sense of resolve, but the undercurrent of tension remained. Walking home with the Millers afterward, Abigail noticed Mason and Joseph Mitchell in deep conversation with the sheriff, all three men wearing grave expressions. When Mason saw her watching, he touched the brim of his hat in acknowledgement but continued his discussion. "There's more happening than they're saying," Abigail remarked to Sarah. "Men and their secrets," Sarah sighed. "James is the same way, but Mason will tell you when he can, I imagine. He doesn't strike me as the type to keep things from those he cares about without good reason." That night, unable to sleep, Abigail heard horses passing the store. Peering through frost-edged windows, she saw Mason and several R cowboys riding through town, rifles across their saddles. They moved with purpose, like men prepared for trouble. The next morning brought no explanation, only Mason's briefly stopping by the schoolhouse to ensure all was well before riding out again. For 3 days, this pattern continued, Mason visible only in passing, the town on edge, rumors flying about strange riders seen near outlying farms. On the 4th day, as Abigail was dismissing her students, gunshots echoed from the direction of town. She hurried the remaining children inside, heart pounding as more shots followed, then shouting. "Stay here," she instructed the wide-eyed children. "Don't leave until someone comes for you." Moving to the window, she saw smoke rising from the direction of the sheriff's office. Before she could determine more, the schoolhouse door burst open. Victor Reese stood there, blood streaming from a gash in his arm, a pistol in his hand. "You're coming with me," he growled, gesturing with the weapon. Now, Abigail positioned herself between Reese and the children. "I'm doing no such thing. Leave immediately before you're arrested for threatening a schoolteacher." "Ain't no sheriff to do the arresting," Reese sneered. "And your cowboys a mite busy at the moment. Now move or I start shooting kids." The threat froze Abigail's blood. Behind her, young Emma Richardson began to cry softly. "Children, remain calm," Abigail said steadily. "Mr. Reese is just leaving." She fixed him with a level stare. "Aren't you Mr. Reese? Because whatever quarrel you have with me or this town, it doesn't involve harming children." Uncertainty flickered in Reese's eyes. "Just come quiet and nobody gets hurt." "Why, what possible value could I have to you?" "It ain't about you," Reese spat. "It's about Young. He took something from me once. Now I'm taking something from him." Understanding dawned. "This is about Mason." "You're using me to hurt him, smart lady." Reese gestured with the gun again. "Now move. My partners are creating a distraction, but it won't last forever." Abigail calculated her options. Refusing might endanger the children, but complying put her at this dangerous man's mercy. As she hesitated, 16-year-old Jacob Richardson, Emma's older brother, slowly reached for the heavy brass bell used to signal class changes. "Very well," Abigail said loudly, drawing Reese's full attention. "I'll come, just don't harm the children." As Reese's focus centered on her, Jacob swung the bell with all his adolescent strength, striking Reese's wounded arm. The man howled in pain, his gun discharging into the ceiling as he stumbled. Jacob tackled him with surprising effectiveness for a boy raised on books rather than brawling. "Run, Miss Zimmerman," he shouted. "Get help," Abigail hesitated, unwilling to leave her students but knowing they needed assistance quickly. "The rest of you out the back door, go to the church and stay there." As the younger children fled, Abigail grabbed a heavy candlestick and brought it down on Reese's hand, sending his pistol skittering across the floor. Jacob continued grappling with the larger man, displaying unexpected courage. "Go," Jacob urged again as Reese began to overpower him. Heart racing, Abigail ran for the main street, screaming for help. The scene that greeted her was chaos, the sheriff's office ablaze, townsfolk battling to extinguish the flames while gunfire exchanged at the far end of the street. She spotted Mason and Joseph Mitchell crouched behind an overturned wagon, returning fire toward several mounted men. "Mason," she cried. "The schoolhouse, Reese." Mason's head whipped toward her, his face registering first relief, then alarm as he comprehended her words. He shouted something to Joseph before breaking cover to run toward her. A bullet kicked up dust at his feet, but he didn't slow. Reaching Abigail, he pulled her behind the shelter of the general store porch. "Are you hurt?" "No, but Jacob Richardson is fighting Reese at the schoolhouse." The other children escaped out the back. Mason's expression hardened. "Stay with Joseph, I'll handle Reese." I'm coming with you, Abigail insisted. Jacob risked his life for me. There was no time to argue. They ran back toward the schoolhouse, keeping to cover where possible. Inside, they found Jacob bloodied but conscious, tied to a chair while Reese searched frantically through Abigail's desk. Looking for something, Victor? Mason's voice was deadly quiet as he leveled his pistol at the intruder. Reese froze, then slowly turned. His eyes darted between Mason and Abigail. Well, ain't this touching? The schoolmarm and the reformed outlaw. Abigail glanced at Mason, confused by the term, but his attention remained fixed on Reese. It's over, Victor. The sheriff's deputies have your partners in custody. Rustling, vandalism, now kidnapping and assault, you'll hang for this. If I hang, I'm taking you with me, Reese snarled. How's the fine lady like knowing she's sweet on a murderer? That's right, he addressed Abigail directly. Your upstanding foreman killed my brother in cold blood. Shot him in the back in Texas. He was trying to murder an innocent family, Mason replied evenly. And I shot him face to face after he'd wounded me first. The Texas Rangers cleared me completely. Courts can be bought, Reese spat. We both know what really happened. As they talked, Abigail moved slowly toward Jacob, keeping her movements small. Mason, seeing her intent, kept Reese's attention focused on him. What was the plan, Victor? Stir up trouble in town, make people suspicious of newcomers, then what? Frame me for rustling. Or just get me out in the open for a shot. Little of both, Reese admitted with a twisted smile. Turn the town against outsiders, especially that fancy schoolteacher you're sweet on. Then when you came riding to defend her, well. He mimed a shooting gesture. You vandalized the schoolhouse, Abigail realized as she worked on the ropes binding Jacob. Wrote that horrible message, tried to drive me away. Wasn't personal, madam, just business. Reese's eyes flicked to her hands, widening as he realized what she was doing. Hey. He lunged toward them, but Mason was faster, tackling him before he could reach Abigail and Jacob. The two men crashed into desks, grappling fiercely as Abigail freed the boy. Get outside, she urged Jacob, who was pale from blood loss but still conscious. Not leaving you, he protested weakly. Go, find help. As Jacob staggered toward the door, the fight between Mason and Reese intensified. Both were strong, determined men, but Reese fought with the desperation of someone with nothing to lose. He landed a heavy blow to Mason's jaw, sending him stumbling backward. Reese used the moment to draw a knife from his boot. Time to finish what should have ended in Texas, he growled, advancing on Mason. Without thinking, Abigail grabbed the fallen bell and swung it with all her strength. It connected with Reese's shoulder, causing him to stagger but not fall. He rounded on her, knife raised. You first, then, he snarled. Before he could strike, Mason recovered and drove his shoulder into Reese's midsection, carrying them both through the schoolhouse window in an explosion of glass and splintered wood. They landed hard on the packed earth outside, Mason on top, but quickly thrown off as Reese scrambled to his feet, knife still in hand. Sheriff Taylor arrived with deputies, drawn by Jacob's alarm. Drop it, Reese, he ordered, leveling his shotgun. For a moment, it seemed Reese might comply. Then with a savage cry, he lunged at Mason one final time. A single shot rang out not from the sheriff's shotgun but from Mason's revolver, drawn in one smooth motion. Reese stumbled, a look of surprise crossing his face before he collapsed. The aftermath unfolded in a blur of activity. Reese's body removed, statements taken, wounded treated. Abigail learned that the distraction had been an attempted robbery of the bank, thwarted by alert townspeople and the sheriff's quick response. The three men involved were indeed connected to the cattle rustling and vandalism, all part of Reese's vendetta against Mason. As night fell, the town began to settle. Families of schoolchildren arrived at the miller's store where Abigail was staying, expressing gratitude for her protection of their children. Jacob Richardson, bandaged but proud, was treated as a hero by his peers. After the last visitor departed, Abigail found Mason waiting outside, his own injuries tended but visible in the bruising across his jaw and the careful way he held himself. You should be resting, she admonished softly. Needed to see you first. His eyes searched her face. Are you truly unharmed? I am, She stepped closer, examining the cut above his eye. Unlike you, I've had worse, so Reese implied. Abigail hesitated. He called you a reformed outlaw, a murderer. Mason sighed heavily. I've wanted to tell you about my past. Just never found the right moment. Is now that moment? He nodded slowly. I wasn't always the man you know. After my parents died killed in a Comanche raid when I was 16, I fell in with bad company. Rode with some men who blurred the line between cowboys and outlaws. Never murdered anyone, but I didn't stop others from doing wrong either. Abigail listened silently as he continued. Things came to a head in Texas. The men I rode with decided to rob a homestead, a family with young children. I wanted no part of it, tried to stop them. Reese's brother drew on me, we exchanged fire. He died, the others fled. Texas Rangers arrived, and given the family's testimony about my attempting to prevent the robbery, I was cleared of wrongdoing. And afterward, I drifted north, wanted to leave that life behind completely. Joseph Mitchell gave me work when others wouldn't, trusted me when I'd done nothing to earn it. Mason's gaze held hers. I've spent 5 years trying to become someone worthy of that trust, someone who might someday be worthy of a woman like you. The vulnerability in his expression touched Abigail deeply. Here was a man who, like her, had faced judgment and sought redemption through honest living. It seems we both came to Aztec seeking second chances, she said quietly. Does knowing this change your feelings? Mason asked, uncertainty shadowing his face. Abigail considered the question seriously. This revelation certainly complicated the image she had formed of Mason, adding layers she hadn't suspected. Yet wasn't her own story similarly complex? We all have pasts we're not proud of, she said finally. What matters is who we choose to become. You chose to protect rather than exploit, to build rather than destroy. She took his hand. If anything, knowing your struggles makes me admire your strength of character more, not less. Relief washed over his features. I was afraid that I'd judge you as others judged me, she smiled sadly. I understand judgment all too well to inflict it carelessly on others. Mason brought her hand to his lips, kissing it gently. When I thought Reese might harm you today, I realized something I've probably known for months. What's that? That I love you, Abigail Zimmerman, completely. And if you'll have me, I want to spend my life proving worthy of your love in return. The words she had both longed for and feared hung in the air between them. Abigail thought of all the reasons to be cautious, their different backgrounds, the complications of their respective pasts, the uncertainties of frontier life. Yet beneath those concerns lay a simpler truth. She loved this man with his quiet strength and unwavering integrity. I have nothing to offer, she said softly, thinking of her tarnished reputation, her lack of family connections or dowry, all the things a man might traditionally seek in a wife. The cowboy smiled, his eyes crinkling at the corners in the way that had first captured her heart. You've already given me everything, he replied, drawing her closer. Hope, purpose, a reason to be better than I was. What more could I possibly ask? When he kissed her this time, it wasn't with the tentative exploration of their earlier embraces, but with the certainty of a future claimed together. Around them, Aztec settled into nighttime quiet, the day's violence fading into memory as stars appeared overhead, the same stars that had witnessed their first meeting months before. Marry me, Mason whispered against her lips. Not someday, soon. Yes, Abigail answered without hesitation. Yes. Spring arrived with renewal throughout Aztec. The schoolhouse, repaired and improved after the winter's damage, welcomed students back with fresh paint and new books donated by merchants in Santa Fe. Abigail's reputation in town had been solidified by her courage during Reese's attack, and even the most skeptical families now supported her teaching methods. Wedding preparations occupied what little free time she had. Sarah Miller and Martha Mitchell had taken charge of most arrangements, treating Abigail like the daughter neither had. The ceremony would be held in May, with Pastor Brighton officiating, and the entire community invited to celebrate afterward. Never seen Mason so nervous, Joseph Mitchell commented one Sunday after church, watching his foreman deep in conversation with the pastor about wedding details. Man who can face down rustlers without blinking, undone by flower arrangements. He wants everything perfect for you, Martha added, squeezing Abigail's hand. It's endearing, really. I'd marry him in the stable if necessary, Abigail confessed. The ceremony matters less than what follows. A wise perspective, Joseph nodded approvingly. Though I'm glad we'll have a proper celebration. This town could use more joyful gatherings. The winter's troubles had brought Aztec closer together. Neighbors checked on one another more regularly, and community projects received stronger support. The cattle rustling had ceased entirely after Reese's death and his accomplice's imprisonment, allowing ranchers to focus on spring calving instead of constant vigilance. Mason and Abigail found moments for themselves amid their busy schedules: Sunday afternoon rides, quiet evenings reading together at the Millers, occasional picnics when weather permitted. During one such outing, Mason revealed plans he'd been developing with Joseph Mitchell. "Joseph's offering me a partnership in the Triple R," he explained as they sat beneath a cottonwood tree, the same one where he had first asked to court her. "Not just foreman, but part owner. There's a parcel on the southwest corner with a good building site. He says we could build our own house there, start our own breeding program while still managing the main ranch operations." Abigail listened with growing excitement. "That's wonderful, Mason. You've earned his trust completely." "It's more than I ever expected," Mason admitted. "A chance to build something lasting, something to pass on someday. To children?" Abigail asked, trying to keep her tone casual though the question was anything but. Mason's smile softened. "I'd like a family with you when you're ready." "I'd like that too," she confessed. "Though I hope to continue teaching, at least for a while. I wouldn't have it any other way." Mason took her hand. "Your students need you, and our children will benefit from having a mother who values education so highly." The easy way he spoke of their future, not just a wedding, but a lifetime, filled Abigail with contentment. They had both traveled difficult paths to find each other, but those journeys had shaped them into people capable of recognizing and valuing what they'd found. 2 weeks before the wedding, as Abigail was closing the schoolhouse for the day, a familiar figure appeared in the doorway. "Mrs. Holloway," she greeted the councilwoman who had first welcomed her to Aztec. "What brings you here?" "A letter." Mrs. Holloway extended an envelope. "Came on today's stage, from Philadelphia." Abigail accepted it with trepidation, recognizing her cousin's handwriting on the address. "Thank you for bringing it." "Bad news?" Mrs. Holloway asked, noting Abigail's expression. "I'm not sure. I haven't had correspondence from Philadelphia since arriving here." "Well, whatever it contains, remember you have friends here now." With an encouraging smile, Mrs. Holloway departed. Alone in the quiet schoolhouse, Abigail opened the letter. Her cousin Aliner's elegant script filled several pages with news of Philadelphia society, family matters, and finally, the reason for breaking her long silence. Edward Blackwell's deceptions have finally been exposed. His wife discovered his affairs with not one but 3 other women and has filed for divorce, creating the scandal of the season. In the ensuing investigations, your accusations have been vindicated completely. The university regrets its hasty judgment and wishes to offer you a teaching position with full restoration of your reputation. I write not only to share this news but to urge you to consider returning. Your name is cleared, your prospects restored. Philadelphia society awaits your return with open arms and apologetic hearts. Abigail sat motionless, the letter trembling slightly in her hands. Vindication, what she had once wanted desperately, was now hers, but it had come too late to matter in the ways she had once thought important. When Mason found her there an hour later, she was still holding the letter, gazing out the schoolhouse window at the mountains beyond Aztec. "Abigail," he approached cautiously, sensing her distraction. "Is everything all right?" She handed him the letter without comment, watching his face as he read it. "Philadelphia wants you back," he said finally, his voice carefully neutral. "Yes. With your reputation restored, the position you deserved all along." "Yes." Abigail studied him, searching for signs of worry or doubt, but Mason's expression remained open, his eyes steady on hers. "What do you want to do?" he asked simply. The question contained no pressure, no expectation, just genuine concern for her happiness. In that moment, Abigail realized how far she had come from the wounded, defensive woman who had stepped off the stagecoach months earlier. "I want to write Aline back," she said slowly. "Thank her for the information, decline the position, and invite her to our wedding, though I doubt she'll make such a journey." Relief and love flooded Mason's face. "You're sure Philadelphia has more to offer than Aztec ever will? Culture, conveniences, society. But not you." Abigail rose, moving to stand before him. "Not our home at the Triple R. Not students who need me or friends who stood by me when it mattered. Philadelphia represents my past. You are my future." Mason gathered her into his arms, holding her with a tenderness that still surprised her from such a physically powerful man. "I was prepared to let you go," he confessed against her hair, "if that was what would make you happy." "I know," she whispered. "That's one of the reasons I love you so much, but my place is here now. My heart is here." The wedding day dawned clear and mild, perfect Mayweather blessing the occasion. The church overflowed with townspeople, ranchers from outlying properties, and even a delegation from neighboring communities. Abigail wore a gown of cream-colored silk ordered from Denver, with lace her mother had preserved from her own wedding dress incorporated into the collar. Sarah Miller helped her prepare in the room above the store that had been her home these past months. "You look radiant," Sarah declared, adjusting the simple veil. "Mason won't know what hit him." "I'm nervous," Abigail admitted. "Not about marrying him, about standing before the entire county." "They're here to celebrate with you, not judge you," Sarah reminded her. "You belong to Aztec now, as much as anyone born here." A knock at the door announced Joseph Mitchell, who had offered to escort Abigail to the church in place of her deceased father. His eyes misted slightly when he saw her. "You'll do," he said gruffly, his usual manner of expressing deeper emotion. "Mason's a fortunate man." "I'm the fortunate one," Abigail replied, taking his arm. The simple ceremony passed in a blur of emotion. Abigail would later remember fragments Mason's face as she walked down the aisle, the warmth of his hands as they exchanged rings, Pastor Brighton's words about love built on mutual respect and shared purpose, the kiss that sealed their vows before the community they had both come to cherish. The celebration afterwards spilled from the church to the town square, where tables had been set up for a community feast. There was music, dancing, speeches, and enough food to feed Aztec twice over. As the afternoon wore on, Abigail found moments to speak with many who had been part of her journey. Jacob Richardson, still proud of his role in defending the schoolhouse. Sheriff Taylor, whose respect she had earned during the crisis. Pastor Brighton, whose faith in her character had helped turn the tide of public opinion. As evening approached, Mason found her sitting with a group of her students, listening to their excited chatter about the summer ahead. "May I steal my wife away?" he asked, offering his hand with a smile that still made her heart quicken. "Your wife," Abigail repeated, testing the words as she took his hand. "I'm not sure I'll ever tire of hearing that." "Good." He led her away from the festivities toward where their horses waited, "because I plan to keep saying it for many decades to come." They rode together toward the Triple R, leaving the celebration behind. Joseph Mitchell had insisted they take his house for their wedding night and honeymoon week, while he stayed in town with his sister. "Our own home will be ready by summer's end," Mason promised as they crested the rise overlooking the ranch. "Until then, we have privacy here." The main house was lit with lanterns, a welcoming glow in the gathering dusk. Inside, they found the table set with a private supper, a fire laid in the hearth, and flowers adorning every surface. Martha Mitchell's thoughtful touches for their first evening as husband and wife. Later, as moonlight filtered through curtained windows and the house settled around them, Abigail lay in Mason's arms, experiencing a contentment she had never known possible. "What are you thinking?" Mason asked, his fingers tracing gentle patterns along her bare shoulder. "That happiness is a strange thing," she replied thoughtfully. "A year ago, I thought it would come from professional recognition, from society accepting me again. I never imagined finding it in a place I couldn't even locate on a map before coming here." "And with a cowboy with a checkered past," Mason added with a smile in his voice, "especially that." Abigail raised herself on one elbow to look into his face. Do you ever regret the path that brought you here, even the difficult parts? Not anymore. Mason tucked a strand of hair behind her ear. Each step, even the wrong ones, led me to you. How could I regret that? 5 years later, Abigail Young stood on the porch of their home, watching her husband return from the spring roundup. The house they had built together stood on a gentle slope, overlooking both the Triple R operations and the mountains beyond, a comfortable 2-story structure with large windows to capture both morning sun and evening views. Beside her, 3-year-old Joseph tugged at her skirt, eager to greet his father. At her feet, baby Margaret slept in her cradle, untroubled by her brother's excitement. "Papa's home," Joseph shouted as Mason dismounted. "Papa brought the cows." Mason swept his son into his arms, tossing him high before settling him on broad shoulders. "Not just cows, partner, brought something special for you and your mama too." From his saddlebag, he produced a package wrapped in brown paper. Books from Santa Fe. That collection of science lessons you wanted, Abigail, and stories for this young man. Joseph bounced with excitement while Abigail accepted the package with a grateful smile. "You remembered, thank you. Always remember what matters to my family." Mason leaned to kiss her, then bent to stroke sleeping Margaret's cheek. "How's our little lady been?" "Perfect, as always," Abigail replied. Unlike her brother, who decided to release frogs in the kitchen yesterday. "Scientific investigation," Mason said solemnly, winking at Joseph. "Very important work." "That's what I told Mama," Joseph agreed triumphantly. Abigail shook her head, unable to maintain a stern expression in the face of their matching grins. "You two are impossible. Go wash for supper while I finish preparing it." As they entered the house, Mason carrying Joseph on his shoulders, while carefully balancing Margaret's cradle in his arms, Abigail felt the familiar wave of gratitude that often overtook her at such moments. Their life wasn't perfect. Ranching brought challenges each season, and balancing her continued teaching with motherhood stretched her sometimes to exhaustion. Yet the love that filled their home made every difficulty worthwhile. The schoolhouse in Aztec had grown to 2 rooms now, with Abigail teaching the older children 3 days a week, while a younger teacher from Denver handled the primary grades. Their own children would receive education there, supplemented by the extensive library Abigail and Mason had built together. His unexpected passion for literature, matching her academic interests perfectly. Joseph Mitchell had officially made Mason managing partner of the Triple R the previous year, with plans to transfer full ownership eventually. "No children of my own to leave it to," he had explained, "and no one I'd rather see carrying on the work we've built." That evening, after the children were asleep, Mason and Abigail sat on their porch watching stars emerge above the New Mexico landscape. It had become their ritual, these quiet moments together at day's end, connecting after their separate responsibilities. "Pastor Brighton asked if you'd consider joining the school board," Mason mentioned. "Says they need someone with vision for the future." "I'll consider it," Abigail agreed, though with Margaret still so young. "Martha's been hinting she'd welcome more time with the children. Says town life is too quiet since Joseph spends most days at the ranch now." Abigail smiled. "A transparent attempt to spoil our children even more thoroughly than she already does. They're the grandchildren she never had," Mason shrugged. "Let her enjoy them." They sat in companionable silence, Mason's arm around her shoulders, Abigail leaning into his solid presence. "Do you ever wonder about the turns life takes?" she asked eventually. "How different things might have been if Edward Blackwell had never betrayed me. If you hadn't stopped that horse your first day in Aztec." "Sometimes," Mason admitted. "But then I remember something my mother used to say before she died. Life rarely takes us where we plan to go, but often takes us where we need to be." "Wise woman," Abigail murmured. "I wish I could have known her. She would have loved you," Mason assured her. "Almost as much as I do." Abigail turned to face him, still finding wonder in the depth of feeling between them after 5 years of marriage. "When I arrived in Aztec, I thought I had nothing left to offer anyone, no family connections, no unblemished reputation, nothing but damaged dreams. And I thought my past disqualified me from the kind of future I really wanted," Mason replied, taking her hands in his. We were both wrong. Gloriously wrong, Abigail agreed, leaning forward to kiss him beneath the vast New Mexico sky, the same sky that had witnessed their first meeting, their wedding vows, and now blessed their continuing journey together. Their life in Aztec wasn't the one either had imagined for themselves, but it had become something better, a tapestry woven from second chances, mutual respect, and a love that had transformed two wounded souls into a family strong enough to weather whatever challenges lay ahead. In finding each other, they had found not just love but home, in its truest and most enduring sense.